Our scripture reading today comes from 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 8 through 11. For we do not want you to be unaware, brethren, of our affliction which came to us in Asia, that we were burdened excessively, beyond our strength, so that we despaired even of life. Indeed, we had the sentence of death within ourselves, so that we would not trust in ourselves, but in God who raises the dead, who delivered us from so great a peril of death, and will deliver us, he on whom we have set our hope, and he will yet deliver us. You also, joining in helping us through your prayers, so that thanks may be given by many persons on our behalf for the favor bestowed on us through the prayers of many. Our speaker this morning, as was mentioned a moment ago, is Brandon Price. I first met Brandon about 22 years ago as a young 18-year-old aimer coming to my field in Mariupol, Ukraine. And I really could not be more proud of Brandon the man, Brandon the Christian brother, Brandon the director of the Ukrainian Bible Institute. And so this morning, he is going to speak to us about UBI and about what's been going on in their lives, especially over the last 2 years. And I'll allow him to introduce his family and other things, and I'll endeavor not to take any more of his time. And so, Brandon, please come and preach the word.
Good morning. It's very nice to be here. I'm here to recruit you to the Ukrainian Bible Institute. Throw this place away and come to a place that's exciting. It's very special to be here. It's always very special when we come back to Lubbock. SIBI is very much coming home. My wife and I graduated AIM in 2004. And we graduated SIBI in 2007. And this is us more recently. This is our family. It's pretty much all I need to say about the two of them. She's just happy to be there, and he's upside down all the time. We worked with AIM for 5 years. Worked with a lot of students that you probably know. We worked with this guy. If you don't recognize him, here he is in his prime. He was our AIM student out in Lochny. I was sent to Mariupol, Ukraine, a steel factory town that no one had ever heard of until a couple of years ago. We won't stay on this picture. This picture is distracting for all kinds of reasons. None of us really looked like that. It was a weird day at the photo studio. It was in Mariupol that I fell in love with ministry, that I fell in love with foreign missions, and decided to give my whole self to Ukraine, and Ukraine accepted me with open arms, and it didn't take long for me never want to leave that place. But on February 14th, 2004, after 21 months serving on that field, my team and I did leave. It was a very, very sad goodbye. I was well aware that it could be the last time, that I ever set foot in Ukraine. And I was afraid I might never see some of those places or people again. But I had a girl waiting for me. We had a dream to pursue foreign missions together. Decided Sunset would be a good place to prepare us to do that. And so we left. I really wanted Ukraine to be my home, but I knew just realistically that might not probably wouldn't happen as we sought to get on a team and as a team tried to decide where we were going to go, and never said out loud, this is the plan. But God heard the desire of my heart, answered the prayers that I didn't dare to pray, and Katie and I returned to Mariupol itself for a year after we graduated SIBI. And then after that, we spent 8 years working with a church planting team in the eastern city of Kharkiv, Ukraine. And so Ukraine became my home in spirit and in fact. And it was unbelievable to realize that, unbelievable to stay in contact with the people that I met, kids I met on the field, and continue to be in their lives. It was towards the end of that 8 years in Kharkiv that I was invited to come to UBI and take over leadership from Jadon Rogers, who at that time, well, when he left, had spent 19 years there with his wife. It was a very interesting proposition. It was not a job I wanted, not a job I ever dreamed of having. I liked teaching. I got to teach every now and then at UBI, and that was special. But I had no interest in leading a school, especially a school that I had held up in such high esteem for so long. All I could picture was becoming captain of a ship and steering it right into the reef or something like that. But after a lot of prayer and after a lot of seeking advice, Katie and I decided that this probably was an answer to prayers that we hadn't been praying, and that maybe God had been leading me to UBI this whole time, from the moment I stepped on the field as an AIM student, maybe before. When we were really wrestling with the decision, I asked my best friend from there, brother in Christ, what he thought of the opportunity. And this opportunity would mean we would have to leave each other. I'd be moving to another place. And he said, I think this could be good for you and Katie. I think this could be good for the Institute. And I think this could be good for Christianity in Ukraine. And those were really big words, overwhelming responsibility that he saw in this job. I took over leadership of the school in June 2020, which, if you're going to pick a year to take over a school, start a new job, I highly recommend 2020. Think about that as you move forward. My first 2 years as director were as smooth as you could expect. It was mostly just figuring out how things worked and also trying not to get arrested or shut down by the health department during COVID. That whole exciting back and forth of being online, back in the classroom, the things changing all the time. But of course, looking back now, we can see how COVID was a big preparation for what was to come just a couple years later. In April of 2021, my wife and I finally purchased our own home in Ukraine, in Kyiv. Thought after all of these years, it's finally time. This time, just like 8 months away from February 2022, feels like the exact right time to buy property in Ukraine. Thinking this is where we're going to be long term, so let's just stop paying rent. But in the fall, as many of you know, Russia was amassing troops along the border. After Christmas, the news from the West was constant warning of imminent invasion. And as we decided, what are we supposed to do as a family, American family, pressure, of course, from the States and staying and not staying, we decided that we would do what the embassy did. And in early February, they decided to move from Kyiv, where we were, to the western city of Lviv. And so we thought, let's at least do that to be cautious. So on February 14th, 2022, we left Kyiv, our home in Kyiv. Packed our car along with another American friend and headed to western Ukraine. And it was a really difficult decision to leave. It did feel like we were overreacting, so we tried to respect the wishes from over here and the Ukrainians who didn't take this seriously at all yet. Hardly paid attention to it at all at that time. We didn't want to leave. Weeks before, when we were talking about leaving, Natasha Maluga, my administrative director, she said that if we did eventually decide to go to Poland, This was all in the realm of the war hadn't started yet. She said you could start preparing a place for Ukrainians. You could start connecting with the churches there. And so if something did happen, things would be ready. And those were very prophetic words. We were in Lviv, Ukraine for 10 days, and Russia invaded. We got word just minutes after the first explosions and headed straight to the border. Sat on the border for 7 hours, which was nothing in comparison to what would happen in the coming days. And as we drove through the borders, the Ukrainian side, I was filled with so many emotions, wondering, will I ever set foot in Ukraine again? Will I ever come back to Ukraine? We drove to Sopot, Poland. Church there had invited us to come even before the war actually started. We worked together with that church to bring as many Ukrainians as possible to safety. They had a building, we had a lot of names, and we started working together. Those early weeks were terrible. They were working pretty much, all day, every day. But the joy that we got to experience was meeting our friends at the train station after they had gone through days and days of harrowing travel with stories reminiscent of World War II nightmares. And they came and they lived at the church building. Converted a lot of the church building to accommodate them. That's the auditorium up there, the Sopot Church. Started a refugee center together. Started distributing aid. Some have commended us for staying to help, which doesn't make sense to us at all, my wife and me. There was no other option. There was no other thought to leave. There was never a discussion. It feels like being impressed that you do everything to get your family out of a burning house like you would do anything differently. There was no option. Our friends and church family were hiding in basements while our city was being bombed, and to even fathom that we'd be like, let's head back to the States, that's just ridiculous. In fact, we do deal with a little bit of guilt's probably not the right word anymore, but just that feeling of we shouldn't have left. We know it was the right thing to leave, but just wish we didn't. The next months were an awful blur of activity. UBI classes were canceled indefinitely the day the war started. Our work was solely focused on helping Ukrainians inside and outside Ukraine. Sunset, of course, has been collecting funds and making them available to us, and we use them in any way possible. And at the beginning, it was throwing money at all kinds of things. We bought kids Chromebooks so they could stay connected to their classes in Ukraine. We helped buy phones for people to stay in contact with family. We bought vans to help ministers with evacuation and getting aid to people. We paid for diabetes medications and train tickets and pet hotels because people were traveling with their pets and then trying to stay in a center with 50 other people. One of our staff members started organizing the delivery of groceries and other supplies to nursing homes and children's homes, and that grew into a network of sending help to ministers at churches around Ukraine who then distributed those groceries to people in their area, and it was a fantastic way for them to help, to come in contact and to meet people as they shared physical bread to also distribute spiritual bread. And this eventually grew into a network of many churches, even outside of our realm, our sphere, the UBI sphere of churches. The work began to grow quite rapidly and is now the primary way we deal with humanitarian aid, distribute it in our work. That highlighted area on the right is where all of the ground battles are, the dangerous area, and this is where all of our constant distribution points are. Currently, there are 41 regular distribution points. Most of those are churches. We provide the equivalent of 7,000 meals a day, And this network that we've built together with the other ministers in Ukraine is bringing an efficiency that allows us to react quickly to other emergencies, like when the Kherson Dam was exploded last year. This network is bringing unity among churches that have, there's been ice between them for many years. That ice has been thawing in a lot of encouraging ways. And we continue to provide support to brand new Ukrainian church plants outside of Ukraine, in Warsaw, in The Hague. There have been a lot of baptisms, almost seemingly several every week, based on the pictures and the things that our partners share. And we are encouraged to see full church buildings that for years have been pretty empty. And of course we know people are coming for the food, but a lot are staying for God's word. And it's been so encouraging. So in fall of 2022, we returned to the classroom, the virtual classroom, but it was in a part-time way. It was a UBI Light. We did one class a day because our students were busy with their ministries and their home congregations, and Russia was beginning to attack Ukraine's infrastructure as we were getting closer to winter and then throughout winter. So doing one class a day allowed us to record the class as we did it, and for the students that were offline that day because of electricity or cell phone connection problems, they could make it up, watch it later, and be with us again on time the next day. We were finally able to graduate our 3 remaining students in May of 2023. We had more level 2 students when the war started, but they went different places and many had to step away. This is 2 of them. One was joining us via Zoom from Ireland, a single mom who was there with her 2 children. These 2 guys are very active, as so many are, in their ministries, and we're very proud of them. By fall of 2023, we took some big steps to change UBI. It had been something we'd been talking about a lot. What does UBI need to be in today's Ukraine? And then the war started, and it was even more an appropriate, important question. Ukraine is not the same country it was 27 years ago when UBI started, and it's not the same country it was 2 years ago from when the war started. So one of the big decisions we made is we shortened our 2-year program into an 18-month program, threw a little AIM flavor in, and we're going to try and have an optional 6-month internship for those students who are able to do that, because not all the students can. We are now 100% online. That is not my future goal. I don't think you can ever replace this time, this physical time together. But while we're not able to, we're trying to be the best online Bible Institute that we can be for our Ukrainian students. And because of that, we now have students joining us that never would have joined us before from all over Ukraine, Poland, Germany, and this year we added a student from Greece. These are all Ukrainian or Russian-speaking or Ukrainian-speaking people. And currently we have 22 full-time students, 5 part-time students, and a handful of auditors that are kind of on their own schedule. Many of them are not just online, they're on their phones all day, every day, on Zoom in a little box. And I feel awful for them. For me, this is all a big experiment. Let's see how people like this, because I can't imagine doing this. But their feedback, they're so excited to be doing what they're doing. They're so excited to be connected, even though it's online, because wherever you are right now in Ukraine can start feeling like a very lonely place. We have some single moms joining us who, not single moms, just moms and housewives, who would never be able to come to the residential program, but they're with us. We have a man who's full-time in the military who watches a class every night and tries to keep up with the students. And we have 3 students in this year's class that are brand new Christians who came to the Lord through the groceries that they received at their churches. So it's very exciting. After it became clear that the war wouldn't be over soon, and we made peace with that as a family, with that fact, our family decided we needed to settle somewhere and didn't want to stay in northern Poland where we were. Did some research, and after that chose the city of Košice, Slovakia. And it's only an hour and a half drive from the Ukrainian border. I run the school from there, from an office there. I get to make monthly trips over the border to distribute funds to help with humanitarian aid. And I've been able to travel back to our home in Kyiv a couple times now, and we'll probably be doing that again this May. We moved there a year ago, January, and it's been a very good place for our family to settle. We spent a year living out of our suitcases in 4 different countries, and coming to Slovakia really brought peace to our family. So as we look toward the future, it's our current goal to just be the best we can be at doing what we're doing, and perfecting both our humanitarian aid and how we're working online, to empower our students to be the ministers they need to be for a country at war, to empower them to be the ministers they need to be for a country post-war, and to be the ministers they need to be in churches around Europe as refugees. We also want to continue to support our current alumni who are working so hard. Many of them are men who have sent their families over the border for safety and have been alone pretty much for 2 years. In November, we held a 2-day spiritual encouragement retreat for all of these partners that we send the grocery packages to, and the response was overwhelming. And afterwards, I was talking to one of my friends who was there, and he said, when you stood up and said, these 2 days are for you and for your spiritual health and encouragement, I almost started crying. And he said the reason why was because for 2 years, people have been asking me what other people need, and nobody's asked me what I need. And that was very significant and a reminder of how important it is to help those who are helping, to serve those who are serving. It was a very joyful time, and again, a time of unity. People under one roof that 2 years ago couldn't have imagined. And there's the group. So despite the tragedy, the potential growth for the school and the kingdom is exciting. Feels like the sky's the limit. But even though the light shining in this darkness is encouraging, God is working, and we recognize that, I do want to be honest and tell you that this has been the hardest time of my whole life. As a minister, as a father, imposter syndrome has never felt so real. Kind of going with the flow and learning to be director, and then when that explodes and you're trying to lead a staff in a crazy new direction, you wonder, am I the right guy for this job? There were many days I wasn't sure how I was going to keep going, and it was only thanks to the support around me that I made it through, to phone calls and for prayers of those who love us and encourage us so much. It's been a hard time because Ukraine is home, and we can't be home right now. But I'm thankful that I can continue to work for the country I love so much. I've been a missionary to Ukraine for 16 years. And some of the blessings that have come with that, there's a picture from when I was an Ames student. And the kid in the front, his name is Sasha, and the one right behind him is Artyom. They're still part of my life. And this is us in the Netherlands last April. Both of them are refugees in the Netherlands, serving the church there, and Sasha is starting a Ukrainian congregation there, working with youth primarily, and I'm so thankful to God that they stay a part of my lives. So we are surrounded by so many people who love us. Our family, of course, but also our Ukrainian family. They've been understanding, which has meant a lot to us. Sometimes I do feel a little faithless that we haven't returned to Ukraine, especially since a lot of Ukrainians have. but our friends encourage us to stay right where we are and to do what we're doing. In November, I was in Kyiv and was walking with a friend from our congregation. We're just talking about the war and his family and everything going on, and he said, a lot of people have left. A lot of people have left. And when he said that, I felt that little sting of, us too, we've left. And then he looked at me and he said, but you and Katie haven't left. So don't start thinking about leaving us now. And when I was recounting that to another Ukrainian friend, he was like, well, yeah, that makes perfect sense. He said, yeah, you're in Slovakia, but you're just over the border. You can come here whenever you want. He said, that means a lot to us. So these trials have been a lesson in faith, continue to be a lesson in faith. The Psalms have become a lot more important in my life. The words of trials and sufferings are vital to me, and what Paul said in 2 Corinthians 1, where he said, we don't want you to be unaware that we were at the point of death, or at least wished we were. And he said, this happened so that we would learn to rely on God. And that's been, if I could summarize the last 2 years, and as they continue, that's been my experience. It's a lesson I'm learning to fully rely on God and trust that he can use us even when we are so weak. Thank you for your support, for your constant prayers, for the partnership we have with SIBI, which helps us do so much of what we're doing. Thank you so much.